we were in the trenches with sales, constantly getting feedback from sales. Now, they weren't telling us, hey, we need a webinar. It's like, no, this isn't a restaurant. You don't just order a webinar.
I like
that. but it's like, hey, what is actually the problem in getting down? Hey, we're getting beat up by, X, Y, and Z objections. Okay, great. How do we help you from like an objection handling standpoint? What's the messaging that we need to do? What do we need to do with our top of funnel marketing to combat those objections? So when you have those conversations, they don't even come up, right? Like, how do we get proactive about it? And sure, maybe there's a webinar in there.
Welcome to How I Made It in Marketing from Marketing Sherpa. We scour pitches from hundreds of creative leaders and uncover specific examples, not just trending ideas or buzzword-laden schmaltz, real-world examples to help you transform yourself as a marketer. Now, here's your host, the Senior Director of Content and Marketing at Marketing Sherpa, Daniel Burstein, to tell you about today's guest.
We've all seen it in the movies. A character has an invisibility cloak or drinks a potion or perhaps turns into a ghost. And then, ooh, how tantalizing. They can see what goes on when they're not around. Well, as our next guest explains it, we shouldn't just think of that kind of moment as some sort of sci-fi fantasy. We should work as if we're trying to optimize that conversation. As she puts it, it's about what people say when you are not in the room. Here to share the story behind that lesson, along with many more lesson-filled stories, is Allison Havner, Chief Marketing Officer of Trust Radius. Thank you for joining me, Allison.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So Allison has been the Director of Brand Integrated and Content Marketing at LiveRamp, and for the past 3 years, she's been at Trust Radius. And you might be listening and say, hey, normally when you have a guest on, they have a lot more roles in their LinkedIn. But she told me she's been in the tech industry for 15 years. So I just want to give a big shout out here to Allison for having some staying power. That's pretty darn impressive. Trust Radius has raised $25 million in funding, and Allison manages a team of 15 responsible for vendor and technology buyer marketing. So, Allison, give us a sense. What is your day like as CMO?
Well, it starts really early because I'm actually based in San Francisco and most of Trust Radius is based in Austin. So a lot of 7 a.m. calls, even though I do try to block off my calendar and make a rule because you don't really want to see me at 7 a.m. But, and it really starts with, we actually have a very structured meeting culture. So my day starts with some kind of kickoff meeting for the day with my team, cross-functional teams, like what needs to be tackled this quarter, this month, this week, et cetera. And then the rest of the day is really interesting. It's filled with a lot of, I would say, cross collaboration. I think my whole job at this point is making sure I'm connecting the dots for people of who they need to be talking to and when. And it all kind of stems from the first morning meeting. And then there's some sprinkled customer calls in there. I love talking to our customers. So at any point I get a chance to join customer calls. I'm there for it. So my team, our CS team tags me a lot in those. And then, the fun executive meetings that pop up a lot, kind of across the board, especially when we're getting ready for, end of the year planning, which I'm sure a lot of CMOs and executive teams are now.
Okay, let me ask you, how do you do cross collaboration if you work remotely and have no notifications turned on? Because I told Allison before this, I was like, hey, I'm turning off Slack, turn off your notification stuff. She's like, I never have mine on. That's how I roll. I'm like, how do you do that? You're my hero. Teach us.
A lot of self-discipline. I think as anyone in the workforce, but especially a marketer, it's really easy to get distracted and have a lot of whiplash going on, and people are, asking for this and can we do this? And it's really distracting. And I think focus is a lot what I push with my team. So I just turn off my notifications and I will check my email when I have time to do that. I will answer Slacks when I have time to do that. I will answer texts when I have time. So I really try to compartmentalize and again, keep that focus, which I think is really hard across the board for people to do these days.
Yeah. We talk about marketing budgets, databases, all these assets we have, but my gosh, in the attention economy, focus is so valuable. And I like that term whiplash too. We got to avoid that. All right, let's take a look at some lessons from your career. As I said before, I really like that about being a marketer. We get to make things, right? I've never been anything else like a podiatrist or an actuary or anything, but I don't think most people get to make things in their profession. So let's look at some lessons from some of the things you made. Your first lesson, creating a category is one of the most difficult GTM strategies, but if you have enough conviction, time, and money to pull it off, it's worth it. So how did you learn this lesson?
So at the early days of LiveRamp, we had a kind of emerging technology, back in it was like 2013 or something around those times. Data onboarding, or essentially CRM retargeting for digital advertising, was not a thing. Ad tech was kind of an emerging industry. But we knew that we had really amazing product market fit. And there was a lot of demand, and we knew we had an opportunity to kind of create this category and be the leader in it. Now, that is probably, like I said, the most difficult go-to-market strategies, because creating a category that is ubiquitous with your target audience, it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and like I said, a lot of conviction across your executive team, the entire company as a whole. And it took us years to do that. But LiveRamp was the leader in data onboarding and expanded into other areas of digital advertising, and it's still, the market leader and is ubiquitous. And I think that because we had that conviction, I think budget, we spent a lot of money on doing it, is super important. And then obviously the time, like if you're weighing the pros and cons of long-term versus short-term, this is not a short-term strategy. This is not something that's going to help you hit your targets that quarter. This is something that is going to help you go from a $10 million company to a $500 million company.
Yeah, so you mentioned product market fit. When you're creating a category, what did you do to make sure that there was demand for this new category? It's something that would actually serve customers and they would want it. Like, for example, when I interviewed Matthew Bowman, the VP of Strategy, GTM, and Growth Marketing for ACT, one of his lessons was interview your customers. And he told the story of how he found all these wonderful testimonials that had been uncovered because he interviewed the customers, he talked to them. So for you, Allison, right, okay, we're talking about big investments in terms of money and time. How did you make sure that before you launched this category that there was product market fit? How did you know?
So our first use case was really around third-party data providers that they have all this data, but then how do they actually activate it and sell it to a brand? So, for instance, if I'm Samsung and I want to buy a certain segment or know more about my customers, I need to buy some third-party data that I can augment my data with and then obviously advertise to them. And so we worked with a lot of third-party data providers to essentially take their data and make it actionable for a big brand. And we started to make those connections. And then we were like, oh, well, we can do this, like Samsung, we can do this with your data as well. We can take those, all those records that you have, we can help you advertise more effectively. And so it was like the Samsungs, the retailers of the world that actually were our first kind of use case where we knew we could go brand direct. And to your point earlier on listening to the customer, we knew that digital advertising, who like when you're building your ICP, your ideal customer profile, who does a ton of digital advertising? Retailers, right? What's in a really competitive market? Retailers. And who's always trying to push the envelope? Digital advertisers at retailers, because it's so commoditized and it's so competitive. So we knew we had something there. So we started with kind of the third-party data providers. We saw this connection with a lot of their customers were retailers. And so we started to listen to those use cases and we connected the dots and we're like, great, let's go after some of the most innovative brands that are out there that are really pushing the envelope. So some of our first customers were like Gap, Sephora, Nordstrom. And then what we did, we're like, great, now how do we get the next set of, customers? Well, customer voice was a huge piece of that. And we're like, okay, here's what these really innovative brands are doing. And they're really pushing the envelope when it comes to advertising and efficiency and effectiveness. Hear from them. And that helped us with our brand or credibility. And that, compounded over time. And really expanded the business. But it really started with, kind of to your point about listening to your customers and connecting the dots, really doing that kind of ICP work to know, okay, who within the industry is actually like, this will actually drive value for them and drive value for them really quickly.
So it sounds like you started with some pilot accounts, but I mean, did you have like customer councils? Did you go to interview the customers? I mean, how exactly did you get the knowledge from those customers? Because I remember I went to this event once and I was sitting next to someone and he talked about how I had no competition. And I always thought, oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's, we hate our competition. Love to have no competition. He's like, no, it's horrible. And he's like, because there's no bake-offs, there's no RFPs, there's no place in the budget for it. We got to create to begin with. So like, it makes sense. I can hear in your voice, okay, there's this value proposition we figured out, but how did you go from, okay, we have a few pilot accounts, but my gosh, like you said, we're going to make this big investment and actually do this. Did you have customer councils? I mean, what did you do with those first few customers to make sure that this was scalable?
Well, I mean, honestly, it was the results that we were driving. I think with digital advertising, it's really easy to measure in a sense. And I guess I shouldn't say that. There's a lot of marketers that would disagree with me on that one. But I think what we found is like, okay, with these customers, kind of to your point, where there was a lot of focus on them and making them successful, getting those results back in those kind of testimonials of how it was working. And you also have to think at that time, digital marketing was so inefficient because people were just like across banner ads across the internet, and programmatic was a disaster. And so any way that you could find these efficiencies was like millions and millions of dollars in advertising. You're talking to some of the biggest advertisers in the world. And so when you have these efficiency gains of like, anywhere from 5 to 10%, that's a lot of dollars to be that they can repurpose, use more on advertising, have more effectiveness with it. So with these few customers, we were really focused on one, outlining the use cases that they were like, hey, like this is great. We want to roll this across like our product lines. We want to roll this across kind of the entire business. We built those testimonials to like land and expand within those accounts. And then we use that, essentially those customer stories, to go get the next line of customers. And we really focus on the industry as well. Like I mentioned, retail is really important. And that's where we started. It was like, let's not try to boil the ocean. And I think a lot of companies, I've talked to a lot of my friends around this, where it's like, when do you verticalize, or you try to boil the ocean too quick? It's like, just be successful in one vertical where this is where you have product market fit, where you like your bread and butter, and grow from there. And I think that was kind of the light bulb moment where it was like, okay, if we just like really kill it in retail, we can expand from there. But let's get like the use cases down. Let's get the messaging down. Let's get the go-to-market motion down. And so I think that, again, going back to like that focus, it was really, really important for us to be able to then expand to other verticals.
As I was having that conversation with an entrepreneur the other day who had a platform that could do many things, of like starting. They were that, because we were mentioning Amazon. Like, okay, Jeff Bezos goes to the moon now, whatever he does. You forget, he just started selling books. That's all he started with, right? And that's how we got to where we are today. But so it also brings up, okay, when you're launching that category, you're doing those, there's a lot you're probably trying to do very quickly and trying to figure out what you're trying to go public with. You said one of your lessons is done is better than perfect. So tell us how you learned this lesson.
I think with marketers and really anything, like the analysis paralysis is real. We had, again, if you think about, it could have been really simple for us to just like go after whatever accounts were knocking at our door or anybody that answered our call. But it took a lot of discipline to be focused, but then it also took a lot of discipline to just get things done and out the door. When you're also dealing with an emerging technology, the messaging around it, the way you price, like pricing and packaging was like very difficult. But we had this notion around, hey, like, let's get it done. Let's make a decision. Let's move forward. And then let's make sure that we're iterating quickly on that. And so pricing and packaging is a really good example. And I think everybody that's listening to this that have been part of pricing and packaging calls, it's like a nightmare. But you have to get something out there, and so it's like, nothing is ever perfect. So get it out there, get it in front of your customers, get the feedback, iterate on that. And it's something I always tell my team, I'm like, it's just an evolution. And I think when you get this mentality, it also helps your team really challenge the status quo. It's like fail fast, learn, let's move on. And we do that a lot at my current team at Trust Radius. I am constantly pushing them. I'm like, you guys get it out the door. Like our motto is like, get shit done, get it out the door. Let's learn from it. And it really creates this kind of psychological safety. And some of the most creative people on my team, you just watch them like light up. And then when something's working and really going down, like, let's double down on it. Let's go, And so I think that this notion of done is better than perfect. It's kind of like a duh, but it's really hard to do.
Well, it's not a done. Let me tell you why. And then I got a question for you here. In all seriousness, it's like, so a lot of times, I've heard the minimum viable product, right? We talk about that. The term I like better is minimum awesome product. When we've done some research, we found this is what you really need with customers, because sometimes you get one chance with them, right? Like they'll see, okay, brand X, Trust Radius, whatever it is. And like, okay, they'll try it out. And then later when it's approved, they're like, I tried it. I'm not messing with that again. So here I have a question for you. It is an impossible to answer question, but I will ask it anyway. And let's see what you have to say. How do you determine when something is good enough to launch, even if it's not flawless? So for example, when I interviewed Cordula Flugel, the marketing director of TNW, on How I Made It Marketing, one of her lessons was also done is not perfect. And she told a story of when helping to launch the Future Females Business School product in 6 emerging markets, how they'd launch it, things would go wrong and stuff, but they would learn so much from their customers. And I think one of the reasons was, from what she was saying, they built a community first. And we have our own AI guild. We've been moving very quickly. We've been messing a lot of stuff up when we did. But I think the one thing that we've done right is we have built trust with the members of this guild over many years with Mech Labs and Marketing Sherpa, so that when something comes out, and this is research we've done into customer first marketing has told us this as well, like they feel like, okay, this company is actually trying to work in our best interest. It's not working well because they're trying to work in our best interest and move quickly, versus what sometimes customers do think is it's not working well because this company is stupid and dumb and doesn't care, whatever it is, right? So let me get back to my original question, which again, in fairness to you, there is no answer to, but I just wonder what your thoughts are. How do you determine when something is good enough to launch, even when it's not flawless?
I think it goes back to is it going to achieve the goal? And we're, marketers, we have to be very, very results driven. And I think when you look at it, is this going to achieve our goal? So a good example is, we know that like our target audience are B2B marketers and go-to-market teams. They live and breathe on social. They are constantly on LinkedIn. And we knew that we wanted to create, we were going to double down on social. We're going to double down on creating really interesting content and thought leadership. So our strategy was thought leadership that's educational. We have millions of buyers that come to Trust Radius. We're constantly making content about the buyer's journey, the buyer's mindset, to help go-to-market teams meet the expectations of those buyers. And so we started a whole series, and we did LinkedIn Lives. And the interesting piece about this, because most people are like, we need a webinar, we need to generate leads, we need how are those leads performing, et cetera. And there's this very webinar centric mindset. And we're like, we're going to go with LinkedIn Lives. We don't track any of the people that come. All we want is content consumption, because we have some really big competitors in the space that have bigger brands than we do, that have a lot more funding than we do. And they've really defined our industry. And so we have to challenge that, and we have to change an entire way of thinking, and we have to gain mind share. We have to build trust. We have to do all these things. How do you do that? Content consumption. We need to build content that shows our POV in the market, and we need people to actually consume it. I think that a lot of marketers don't have a content problem, but they have a consumption problem, because we're so focused on lead generation and pipeline and revenue. Fine. That's all really, really important things. But you can't forget that at the end of the day, it's mind share. Are you top of mind? Are you, when that person is actually in market, when your sales team reach out, do you have mind share that they actually answer that email or answer that call? And so with these LinkedIn Lives, it was all we want is people to see the content and, again, try to change this mindset that our competitors have put out in the market, because we approach our business very, very differently. And it worked. like, and it's also funny because, people are like, oh, like this content consumption, like, how are you measuring it? And like, I think there's still like the normal funnel metrics that you look at. But at the end of the day, what I look at is how many more qualified people are coming and knocking on our door. How many, again, what's our outbounding? How is that looking? Is that super healthy? Also, the meetings that we're having are how qualified are they? Are we priming people really well on this kind of like mindset change and Trust Radius value prop? So when they go and talk to our sales team, that we're having more qualified meetings and that those deals are accelerating faster. And when you look at like when we started doing this, and it's been over the last 2 years that we really changed our strategy around just pure content consumption and not caring about these like, very bottom of the funnel metrics as much. It's really changed kind of the game when it comes to our outbounding and the conversations that we're having in our deal acceleration.
All right, that's big, but I got a really specific question. I want to know how you first launched that with sales, like, and how, or internally with the organization, because we've got a webinar coming up November 20th right now, and every day everyone's looking at those reg numbers. And I like you're saying such good things because you're a challenger brand, so we got to disrupt. I love that, but I also just think very practically, if I was in your shoes, I wouldn't know if anyone's going to show up to that LinkedIn Live, that first one or the second one, and sales is still going to be saying, "Hey, where are the leads?" So how did you really get that ball rolling? I mean, that's a great thing is once something's working, it's got, its own inertia, and you could say like, okay, look, we've got all these kind of downstream metrics, but how'd you get it rolling at first?
It's a philosophical alignment. To be honest, like, I think that you have to again, going back to this conviction in your strategy and setting expectations. Hey, this isn't going to be the gold rush at the beginning of the day. Like, it's just not. And I think what marketers get really distracted by is like, where are my leads? Where are our meetings and, et cetera. And it's like, we have to think about our brand. And again, like one thing that we did actually that's really tactical is close loss analysis. There's nothing better than close loss analysis, in my opinion, as a marketer. That was like the first thing I did when we went to Trust Radius. I was like, great, tell me all the deals that we lost and all the customers that have churned. And then obviously all the ones that we won and why. But like, I was very interested in the close loss. Nobody knew who we were. We did not have enough executive mind share. We have big competitors in the space, and that's who their boss knew. Okay, so if that's the problem, then how are we going to fix it? That's a brand problem. And so we need to invest in that. And this is part of that strategy. So what I did is I connected it to the business problems that I found in the win-loss analysis. And then I connected it to our strategy of how we were going to solve for that. And I set the expectation of like, this is the long game. This is not going to help us right now in Q2 or whatever it was. But I was like, this is the long game. This is for tomorrow's revenue number.
What I really like about what you're saying is sometimes you talk to marketers and you see throughout their career, like when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so they've got the tactics they're good at and they just bring them to the next company. And so for you could have just brought category creation, right? You could have said, okay, we've got these bigger companies that we're competing with. Hey, let's just create a new category so that we're not competing with them anymore. But I like you've done a really good job of breaking down, hey, here's the challenge and the opportunity. And so let's serve it with the right tactics. I also like when you talk about close loss analysis because it brings up that lesson I mentioned at the open, which I thought was so great. It's about what people say when you are not in the room. So close loss analysis, that's what we all want to know, right? What's being said when they're deciding. I think you were talking about this in a more personal level. So how have you lived this lesson in your career, you personally?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good call out. And if you think about, if you pull from your CRM, Salesforce, whatever, and you look at all the closed loss, it's like budget, timing, it's like really basic. But when you actually like sit down with the prospect or customer and like, first of all, they really appreciate it. Like I would love for someone to call me and be like, hey, why didn't you pick my platform? And I would tell them and we could have like a conversation and it's really, really productive. And it actually led to opening up more conversations. They're like, wow, nobody's ever done this before. I would love to entertain another conversation in the next quarter. So that was really interesting. I think from a personal standpoint, really, really early in my career. When I started at Live Ramp, I was very green. It was my first tech job. I had no idea what was going on. Like I had spent most of, I was a ballerina and lived in Dubai 2 years before that. And so the whole corporate world I was getting introduced to. And the VP of marketing comes up to me and he says, "Hey, Allison, I just wanted to tell you, like, we all got together and, you're on our rising star list." And I looked at him, I was like, "What does that mean?" I was like, "Thank you." And I just walked away. I was like, I don't even know what that means. Now I realized they were doing the 9-box exercise and I was up in that corner. But when I was, in my career, I was like, what is going on? And then it like connected the dots. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're just sitting in a room and talking about everybody's performance. And I was so young and so green. I had no idea. Cause like, being classically trained, like the teacher tells you to your face, like either you look great or you're not, right? They're giving all of the criticism directly to your face. And so this concept of people going into a room and talking about performance and like that doesn't necessarily get shared with you was like this really foreign idea. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, people are constantly evaluating me and what I'm doing. And it just completely changed my perspective. And I think what really is part of like my values and what I bring to the role is that I'm always pushing for ownership and accountability. And I think that's really hard to find these days where it's like, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And if I'm not going to, right, or if I'm going to miss a deadline, or if I'm going to, whatever the situation is going to be, set the expectations properly. And the follow through is just so important. In if something epically fails, that's on me. Like the buck stops with me. And when I was really young in my career, I think that really helped me get from one role to the next. And my career and why I stayed there for so long is like the trajectory of the company was just hyper growth. And my career was the exact same. And I think it was because of this accountability and ownership and I knew that, hey, when I want people saying about me, Allison, she gets shit done and you can count on her. And she's going to take complete ownership of it. And I made sure that my actions were making sure that narrative was told when I was not in the room.
I loved that lesson because it was so visceral. Like when you see those words together, like right when I read it in that podcast guest application, I went to daydream and thinking of like what is that conversation like and picturing the room. And it's like when they do a cutaway in The Simpsons or whatever. But I don't want to overlook something you said and just let it pass by, that you were a ballerina in Dubai. So I wonder, is there anything you learned from being a ballerina or from living in Dubai that has helped in your marketing career? Because I've interviewed all sorts of marketers, and it's funny when you look at some things like way in their background, like being a personal trainer, journalist, all of these different things, like we take that with us and we learn lessons that help with our career. So ballerina, Dubai, anything there that's actually helped you in your career?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, living in the Middle East, that is completely foreign to your culture. Everything's different. And so I think the adaptability, like you can put me probably in any situation and I could figure it out and I can adapt and make it work. And I think that was a big piece. Like I had reverse culture shock when I moved back to California because I had just acclimated so well living there, and I still hold like a lot of like you put me in any kind of Arabic restaurant, like I start ordering and I know exactly like I know a few. I do not speak Arabic, but I know a few words to be conversational, and you should see the way that like they're like shocked. So I think the adaptability of living abroad and being away from all your family and friends and making friends and making a community, like that's something that you have to take with you and any beyond your job and your own life is how you adapt and build a community around you, I think is really important. And then being a ballerina, I mean, gosh, just discipline and hard work. It is insane. The work and the hours, you're dancing 6 to 9 hours a day. And you're putting a lot of strain on your mental and physical health. And so you have to have a lot of discipline and you have to work really, really hard.
Well, in the first half of the episode, we talk about lessons we learn from the things we build, which for most marketers is things like brands and campaigns. And for Allison, it also includes ballets. In the second half, we're going to talk about lessons from the people we made them with, because that's what we get to do as marketers. We make things and we make them with people. But first, I should mention that the How I Made It in Marketing podcast is underwritten by MECLabs AI, the parent organization of Marketing Sherpa. You can join the CEO of MECLabs AI, Flint McLaughlin, for an accelerated version of Get Productive with AI on Thursday, November 20th at noon Eastern Time. There is no cost. Learn more and register at meclabsai.com/getproductive. That's MECLABSAI.com/getproductive. It will not be an exciting, snazzy new LinkedIn live, but it will just be a boring Zoom meeting. But the Zoom meeting itself will be the boring part. It's going to be an awesome, fun thing. We're going to help you get more productive with AI. So make sure to join us on November 20th. All right, let's take a look at some of the lessons you learned from the people you collaborated with. You mentioned Rebecca Stone, the SVP of Revenue Marketing at Cisco, and you said you learned to align marketing initiatives to revenue. How did you learn that from Rebecca?
Well, first, Rebecca taught me how to be a marketer. I had no marketing experience, and she totally took me under her wing, and we're still good friends today, and I'm still constantly learning from her. But I think really she taught me the importance of you're not marketing for marketing's sake. Like you're not putting out this like amazing ad creative and like this email nurture for the email nurture. You're doing it to drive revenue. And I think that, it's interesting when you talk to marketers and you say, well, what's your bottom line goal? It should always be revenue. There's no other goal. It's revenue. And yeah, there's a lot of things that ladder into that a marketer does. But at the end of the day, you need to be driving growth. And so that was a lesson I learned from her. And you have to be aligned with sales. My husband's actually a CRO. And so we have a lot of conversations about this, but I firmly believe that the CMO and CRO need to be philosophically aligned of how they're going to run the go-to-market team. And alignment has to be a top down, and it has to be the standard of the team. And that really came from Rebecca. We were in the trenches with sales, constantly getting feedback from sales. Now they weren't telling us, hey, we need a webinar. It's like, no, this isn't a restaurant. You don't just order a webinar.
I like that.
But it's like, hey, what is actually the problem, and getting down, hey, we're getting beat up by, X, Y, and Z objections. Okay, great. How do we help you from like an objection handling standpoint? What's the messaging that we need to do? What do we need to do with our top of funnel marketing to combat those objections? So when you have those conversations, they don't even come up, right? Like, how do we get proactive about it? And sure, maybe there's a webinar in there or not, but that's not the point. The point is that we're in this together, and we're like, at the end of the day, if sales hits their revenue number, marketing failed, right? And so that was like a big lesson learned about sales and marketing alignment, and always thinking about the bottom line, which is revenue.
All right. So in How I Made It Marketing, I like to challenge ideas. We unpack them. Not that I disagree. I mean, I'm sure no one listening will be like, no, we shouldn't be aligned to revenue. But let me ask this real challenging question about how you plan and align your budget when revenue can be a lagging indicator, not a leading indicator. So for example, when you talked about category marketing and building that up, right, revenue there was a lagging indicator. And even I would think in your current role, it would be, when you have a marketplace, it's first building that marketplace and that engagement with your buyer, who your visitors are your buyers, your users, and revenue can be a lagging indicator. So yes, we want revenue. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. But practically, how do you plan when revenue can be a lagging indicator?
I think you still have KPIs across the funnel, across the buyer's journey. So you still need to look at the KPIs in terms of like, okay, like the basics of like at the top of the funnel, what's your website traffic look like? What's page conversion? What's time on? Like all of those KPIs that you look at across the funnel are still really, really important. And looking at them, whatever the cadence is, we look at it quarter over quarter. What's in the red? What's in the green? What do we need to adjust? Where do we need to add more budget? Where do we need to double down? I look at this from like almost like a high level, or maybe not a high level point of view, but for instance, I think it's, you hear a lot about this, but like I would never walk into a board meeting and talk about how great all these KPIs were if we weren't hitting our number. Because there's no easier way to start finger pointing and create misalignment with the sales team. If you're going into the board meeting and you're like, look at all these amazing KPIs, we brought in all of these meetings, and then sales is like, we missed our target and our retention numbers. And you're like, that's just a huge disconnect. So I think that, so yes, I think it's the unified KPIs that you have with your sales team, but it's like a Venn diagram in my mind where it's like, here's all the marketing stuff that I have to care about that are the early indicators of success. Hey, we're seeing like tons of website traffic. We're seeing our conversion rates go up. Wow, we're seeing a ton of inbound. Wow, our email open rates are through the roof. Our return on ad spend is so great. Like whatever it is, you have all of those marketing KPIs that you're making sure that are laddering into revenue. And then sales also has all of their KPIs that are laddering into revenue. But I think that's how I, like in my mind, it's like a Venn diagram of like, here's all the marketing stuff, here's all the sales stuff. And then in the middle is revenue.
So if I had to put words in your mouth, it sounds like when you're talking about revenue, really you're talking about ownership and kind of that, like you said, when people are saying about you when you're not in the room, that's really what you're talking about with revenue.
Yes, 100%.
Awesome. You mentioned this briefly earlier about voice of the customer, but let's dive into a little more. You said lead marketing strategy with the voice of your customers, and you learned this from working with Allison Metcalf, the CRO of Cloudinary. How did you learn this from Allison?
So Allison she's just such an impressive female leader. I was really, really lucky at LiveRamp to have a lot of really successful, powerful female leaders to kind of show me the way. And Allison was one of them. And she built our entire customer success team from scratch. We didn't have a customer success team. It was kind of like, kind of to our point where we were like, okay, with these early customers, it was like all hands on deck. Like the whole company was making them successful. We didn't really have this whole like post sale process or team or anything. So Allison was brought in to build the entire customer success. And we really partnered with her because our whole strategy was like, we need like, again, you're this emerging technology. You don't have a lot of brand trust. You don't have a lot of notoriety. So how are you going to get that? And what's the fastest way to do it? It's have your customers do the talking. Because at the end of the day, people want to hear from their peers. They don't want to hear from you. I want to talk to somebody that's a CMO at a company that's like mine. What are they doing? I don't want to hear from the vendor. And I mean, we see that in our research at Trust Radius. We're constantly researching the way buyers think and their expectations. And the number one thing that they want is to talk to their peers. And you see that with a lot of these like communities and forums that are everywhere. Because again, you can learn so much from your peers. And so our strategy was to get our customers talking to each other. Like, again, kind of like a duh situation, but it's really difficult to do because you have to first of all, you have to make your customers successful. Then you have to get those stories. You have to get them to be an advocate. And we really created a platform for them to highlight themselves as like an individual. So we had this like, it was like an event, like roadshow that we did across the country. We'd find all these like hot spots of where our prospects were. And we'd kind of go to like, this sounds odd, but like communities that weren't going to get like a ton of digital marketing conferences, if you will. So we were going to like Columbus, Ohio and like Raleigh. But we had a ton of Minneapolis, but we had a ton of customers there. Or prospects as well. And we put on these like half-day digital marketing conferences. They were free. We'd put our customers up on stage and they would be talking about, and again, they didn't have to talk about LiveRamp. The underpinnings were LiveRamp. Like we powered the use cases and the stories that they were talking about. We'd get our partners involved and we did that. And that was a huge part of our growth strategy and our marketing strategy was like, let's create a platform for our customers to do the talking. And then let's go to all of these hotspots around the country of where our customers are. Like at one point, like Bank of America was a huge prospect. So we did an event in the Ritz-Carlton that's attached to their building, which it'd be hard to do that this day with everybody being remote. But back then everybody was in an office. So in the hotel, we had the event that was literally attached to their office building. And then we got US Bank to talk. I don't know how we pulled that off, but I guess we were really fun and people like to hang out with us too. You got to have that element. But then we got 20 people from Bank of America to show up to the event. So we were very, very strategic about where we went, how we planned it, who was speaking. And it was huge. And Allison and her team were like at the crux of it all.
That's awesome. So your account-based marketing can kind of come together with that.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you that. So I like this, talking about voice of the customer, so customers hearing from each other. But have you ever used that type of research, voice of the customer research, to determine brand voice? Because the brand still has to have a voice, especially, I bring this up now because there's so many emerging channels too where we have to determine our voices. There's, artificial intelligence customer facing devices, or I did a case study with Pedigree where the pet food brand used interactive audio advertising technology to reach out to music streaming listeners, right? There's just so many places we need to have a voice now. So I see you nodding. Have you used voice of the customer to determine that? It's great connecting the customers with each other, but what the brand voice should actually be and where it should be?
And I think, I talk to our customers about this a lot, because you have to infuse your brand messaging with the way your customers talk about you. And I think there's definitely a distinction between the two, but a lot of people are like, oh, I just want this customer quote. I'm going to throw it on my website and call it a day. And it's that's not really using customer voice. But we actually work with if you think about reviews and your customer reviews, we actually work with a lot of our customers to synthesize that and what are the phrases that they're using? How do they talk to us? How do they talk about us versus our competitors? What are the keywords that they're using? And then how do we use that in terms of building that brand voice and the way that we talk about ourselves and the way that we present our POV? And I think that you start with the customer voice, and a lot can stem from that. It's not, just your customers doing the talking. You still have to have a point of view. And then how you convey that point of view is really important as well.
Yeah, no, as a copywriter, back in the day, just seeing customer reviews or just seeing anything in the actual voice of the customer and seeing the words they use is so powerful. I remember there was one with kidney dialysis. I think a kidney was called nephrology or something, and the brand was using that. And you just saw how people were talking about it. They didn't even know what that was. They were using a different word. And now for me, AI is so freaking powerful with that. You can just take all this, lots of information, and use AI to really find what those right words are. All right, let's talk about a current lesson. Bill Toll, CFO of Trust Radius, who you're currently working with today. You said you learned from working with Bill, partner to understand the investment needed for growth while also achieving profitability. So how are you learning this lesson right now?
Yeah, so Bill, it's probably pretty rare in businesses today, but my CFO, I feel is my best friend, which is probably really rare for a CMO to say. But he's, we've worked together over the last 3 years, and it's been really interesting, how the tech. How you measure how a tech company is performing has completely changed. And you've heard this so much around the growth at all costs. And now it's Rule of 40, the talk track goes on. But, at LiveRamp days, it was absolutely hyper growth at all costs. We were growing 30-40% year over year. And then now this different, you're completely operating in a different mode. And it's really important that you partner with your CFO on this because you need to be kind of to your point where you're asking around investment and how I manage the budget. And Bill's a big piece of that. And we have a lot of conversations around where do I think, and it's not even in marketing sometimes, where do I think that we're going to have the most impact to the business and our bottom line now and in the future, and where do we need to make those investments? And I think you really kind of put your CMO executive hat on and think about the business. And it's actually, I think we need to be investing more in engineers. Maybe marketing isn't going to get the 10% increase that I wanted and the head count that I wanted, but I think where we're falling short is we need more engineers building things faster. And that's actually going to help us sell. And that's actually the time to impact is going to be way shorter than throwing a bunch of money into whatever campaign. And so Bill has been an amazing partner where you're doing those evaluations and people are coming to the table and talking through investments, and then really thinking about the company first and not your department and how you want to grow. It's like, sure, you can give me, a $10 million budget and we'll make things happen. But at the same time, that $10 million would be spent elsewhere. And the time to impact could be a lot shorter. And so having those conversations and weighing the short-term and long-term goals, he's been such a partner and it's helped me a lot. I think, when I was at LiveRamp, I reported into the CMO. I wasn't a part of those conversations. Like I would get my budget, I would get my head count, and then I would, manage that across marketing. It was very insular. And now, as a CMO and, reporting to the CEO and the board, you have to have your company hat on. And Bill has really, really taught me how to do that over the years.
Okay, say I'm a senior marketing leader. I'm listening to this right now. I'm starting a new job tomorrow. So what advice would you give me to start building that relationship with the CFO? Because we're actually about to, on Marketing Sherpa, going to publish a never before published data about marketing's collaboration with different departments. I think there's 7 departments. Oh, yeah. And a spoiler alert, I want you guys to see the data is really not great. It's especially not great with the finance department, maybe a little better with sales. So I think, this is a lesson I've definitely heard repeatedly on how I made it marketing. Different marketers have their tips for how to build that relationship, but it is a vital and important relationship with that CFO. So let's say senior marketing leader, start a new role tomorrow, about to roll into the office or virtual, hybrid setup, whatever. What piece of advice would you give to start building that CFO relationship?
You better have some business acumen and know your business metrics and be able to talk about it. And, the CFO is going to be asking you, like, you're looking at, okay, what are the business metrics that matter? You better be able to talk to that. And then you also have to be able to ladder everything that, your marketing strategy and speak their lingo. And I think that was really hard for me. And I'm still learning and adapting to that. And, but okay, we're talking about our CAC, our, lifetime value to CAC. And you're like pulling all these acronyms out and you're like, okay, what? And how do I ladder marketing initiatives into this? Or how do I justify all of these things that we're doing and make it in the terms that he's going to understand? And that is, I think, walking in, again, that business acumen and the business metrics and understanding how you're going to connect the dots for your CFO. Because that's at the end of the day what they're trying to do. They're like, great, I'm giving you all this budget. You're running all of this marketing stuff. Now, how is that going to support these business metrics that I need to report onto the board and the investors, et cetera? And I think the more that you connect the dots for them, that builds the trust in the relationship.
Reminds me of that movie. I don't even remember what movie it was where they thought EBITDA was a Japanese word. They kept saying EBITDA. They didn't know what they were talking about. Don't roll in on day one and do that, right?
Yeah.
All right,
maybe stay away from EBITDA.
All right, so we talked about so many different lessons from your career, some different stories. If you had to break it down, Allison, what are the key qualities of an effective marketer?
We've said it a lot, but I think the conviction and being confident and listening. I think to have confidence in yourself of what you're doing, and have confidence in your team, and then the conviction for the follow through. And listen, I think the listening piece is so important that we lose it. Listening to your customers, listening to your team, listening to sales, listening to the executive team. I think that those 3 things, if you can kind of combine them all together, you'd be good at any role, honestly. But I think as a marketer, you're really the glue, and you work across the entire company. You are you have to work with product. You have to work with sales. You have to work with the CFO. And so if you can be, that confident, stakeholder in that and listen to them and have that translate into your strategy and how you show up for the company, you're going to be really, really successful.
Well, Allison, it's been a pleasure listening to you. Thank you so much for sharing all your lessons and stories from your career with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
And thanks to everyone for listening.
Thank you for joining us for How I Made It in Marketing with Daniel Burstein. Now that you've gotten inspiration for transforming yourself as a marketer, get some ideas for your next marketing campaign from Marketing Sherpa's extensive library of free case studies at marketingsherpa.com. That's marketingsherpa.com.